Afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Edward Lynch, and I'm the chair of Professional Liverpool's Health Board Committee. Today, we've got a great event with Steve Rotheram and Mike Gibney. They're going to be discussing the upcoming Fair Employment Charter, which is going to be rolled out across Liverpool. At the end, we'll be taking some questions, and also I'll be doing a 5 to 10 minute presentation on COVID and the vaccines. And a bit of my experience in hospitals as well. So without further ado, Mike and Steve, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ed. So I suppose I'll just begin by saying, so I'm Mike Gibney. I'm the Director of Workforce and Innovation at the Walton Centre. And the Walton Centre has been chosen by Unison to work with them as their NHS partner to develop the Fair Employment Charter. Obviously, we're delighted to welcome Steve Rotheram, the Metro Mayor of the Liverpool City Region, who's been, along with Unison's Francis O'Grady and the local Unison branch, has been at the forefront of launching this and leading its development. So just before we start, just sort of say, so obviously we're going to have a conversation. The plan is that we'll kind of work our way through what it is, why it's of interest to both public and private sector, what the need for it is, and a number of those things. But clearly, there's a chat function. You can pop questions in there. We've got a couple of grown-ups helping us. So if we get lost, they'll be pointing out that there's questions there. And we can hopefully factor those into the conversation. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to Steve to start off by sort of saying, you know, Steve, I suppose really, first of all, why do we need a fair employment charter?
Thanks, Mike. It's a great question, isn't it? Because that's what I start with most things in my mind. Why do we need this? Why should we be doing that? Why are we still doing X instead of Y? And going back to one of the reasons that I wanted to stand as the Metro Mayor and then was successful, I think because I'd highlighted that there are things that we can do within our city region through devolution that a national government would never do on our behalf. And one of those main planks of my manifesto in 2017 was around obviously fairness, around social justice, but around how we can encourage the likes of businesses, the combined authority, and our trade unions to work in concert to try to see whether we can get win-win situations. And this was one such, because demonstrably, those companies that treat workforces well have better productivity, and that obviously affects the bottom line. And look, there's only the moral and ethical reasons to do this, but for many people, and certainly for government that I speak to and Treasury, we always have to be very cognizant of the fact that lots of these things are pounds, shillings and pence still. So it's for the right reasons, but also it will provide businesses with an economic uplift because they'll get more from the workforce. So for me, it's a process that's 3 years plus in the making. And many people might think, oh, well, you just do these things, don't you? Well, we went to a large stakeholder group to ensure, one, that we were getting things right, but two, that as things developed and then we hit COVID and lockdown, that we started to include additional parts and recognize additional problems for employers because of this particularly difficult period that we're all going through. So for me, statement of intent for our city region that we want to be the fairest, most socially just, and the best place anywhere in the country to work or to run a business. So that's the win-win. And when I've spoken to all sorts of stakeholders on this, it does sound a bit of a lofty ambition, but if anywhere is capable of doing something like this, then I think it's our city region. And I want this charter to be the gold standard. I want it to be a model that other parts of the country look to, so that they too can improve their workforce conditions and outputs. And myself and Andy Burnham work always very much, hand in glove. Andy's doing the same sort of things in Greater Manchester, and theirs is called the Good Business Charter, I think it's called, and ours called the Fair Employment Charter. We're also asking the candidates, certainly the Labour candidates across the country who are standing to be Metro mayors, if they'll also adopt something similar. But I think the last year is reminding us all that too often there are unscrupulous employers still out there, and some of those people have been willing to risk the health and well-being of their staff during the worst pandemic for the century. So the Fair Employment Charter is our answer to remedy that sort of problem. It's not about trying to embarrass unscrupulous employers. Some of them can't be embarrassed, but it is to try to take some of those people who perhaps haven't fully recognized the opportunities here, but it's about them coming on a journey with us to better employment practices. And look, the opposite side of that coin is that we have many brilliant employers in the city region, and for them as well, we want to recognise those that pay the real living wage, or that have clamped down on insecure work or 0 hours contracts. The ones who recognise trade unions, give their staff opportunities to progress, they take people from underrepresented groups, all of them sort of things. We want that to be recognised as well, and that's what the Fair Employment Charter does. So I want to use the carrot that I have in the form of funding that we distribute with contracts through the Combined Authority to really encourage its take-up. And I'd just like to thank all of those organisations who are on the call. And by the way, since I've done a few of these, there have been people who have come to me and said, send us the details, and then have signed up, because they then better understand that this is a way in which we can demonstrate good and fair employment in the city region and encourage everybody to work towards that fairer economy that we want to see right the way across the 6 districts in the city region. So thanks for that, Mike, or I'm not sure whether it's Edward who's going to take us through, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, I was just we'll just dig a little bit more, Steve, just before we do, because so just to share with people, so it's a brilliant website. So if you Google the Fair Employment Charter, it is a fabulous website. You can really see the charter and understand it. The 4 areas, because it's interesting what you say, because I think everyone knows we've got an unemployment challenge coming down the pipe post-COVID. I think the temptation can be for people to get labour at a cheaper price, and so you've got the fair pay, fair hours in there. Particularly interested from an NHS perspective around the healthy workplace. I didn't know if you might want to say a little bit more about that, Steve, because it's interesting, because as we went through COVID, Steve, we kind of, we think we're really good employers in the NHS, and we suddenly realised we had a heck of a lot more to do in terms of, so we expect consultants to deal with death in a way that perhaps the rail industries was better at. A train driver, has 3 people kill themselves under their train. They were getting counselling, they were getting therapeutical intervention. In the NHS, we expected our consultants to just crack on and be supermen and women. And so we've kind of learned a bit about actually you can always improve. And of course, fair pay and being the best kind of employer in terms of health and well-being you can only help your retention, and can only help you be a good employer, and can only help Liverpool raise its brand. So I think it was a great idea before COVID, but I think it kind of feels like there's an additional momentum. And I didn't know if you want to, I know you kind of touched on it, Steve, you could say just a little bit about COVID and what that's probably meant in terms of the adoption of this charter, particularly for our private sector colleagues and businesses.
Yeah, so healthy workplaces is about obviously a healthy culture within the business. It's about the actual type of environment that people are working in, but it's also about the processes and procedures of when things go wrong. And you know, what you lot have been through in the NHS over the last 12 months, and my wife's a frontline NHS worker as well, so I do get told some of the horrific stories, but it just beggars belief. So we had gone through quite lengthy consultation, and then realized that people's health and mental health and well-being was going to be severely impacted by what was going on. We wanted that to form part of when people are signing up to be a fair employment company. We wanted them to also play due respect to people's mental health and well-being as well. So I've been speaking to Merseycare, as many people know, where we are, myself and Joe Flannery, pulling together a round table of all the significant major players in the city region, because when we've been speaking about this, there will be a tsunami in the next few years of people who are going to have to deal with the ramifications of what's happened over this last 12 months, including staff. So it's not just about people outside of the business environment, very much about employees. And we want to develop a strategy around that. And we think that this is the starting point for employers to recognize that there are considerations of what we are going through for their employees. And that, alongside the other pillars, I think starts to form an overall good practice guide for employers to start to really to work towards. And you're right also, again, we're the first in the country to do something like this. Francis O'Grady was very, very complimentary about what we were doing on this aspect of it. And it all starts to come together under something that myself and it was Andy Burnham again. We did a Northwest press conference and we started to talk about building back better. That was before, by the way, Boris Johnson hijacked it, just to let people know. But subsequently, we saw it in the American elections, didn't we? Even the new president, Joe Biden, was using Build Back Better. What we were talking about is slightly different, I think. We were talking about building back things better than they were before the pandemic. So pre-pandemic, there were a lot of things that we saw through the prism of the pandemic that we thought, why have we done things? Why have we allowed things to happen that way? And we didn't want to go back to that in a post-pandemic world. So the idea was we could build things back better, not buildings, but structures, the way we treat each other, identifying the excellent work of certain people. You know, it's no good just going out and clapping people for a few months. We need that to continue ad infinitum. So it was all around that, Mike, and that's why the Fair Employment Charter really does chime so much with that greater vision of a better society.
I think it's really good. I mean, I say that sort of as HR's been my career, and that connection from a healthy and safe workplace, fair pay, inclusive, and a just workplace works really well. And I think we've often found, so obviously the NHS, people think about people like Dr. Ed Lynch, our chair, you know, and think about the salaries that they may earn, but most of our workforce, you know, we've got many Unison members, we've got many, you know, nurses aren't actually at the big table at Monte Carlo, and actually, so a lot of the offer we have internally is often around financial management and debt counselling and those kind of things. That so even if you're gonna pay low wages, you know, you can still support and you can access this support, and it just gives it's a great framework. And it does seem to be something that it's great for Liverpool. I suppose just before we open up to questions, because I can see we've got one or two now, but just before we do, it is that bit where it's a great framework, and it's actually, you know, it's just right, isn't it, Steve? You know, it feels like you'd want to go out and say, this is what Liverpool's doing.
Yeah, and look, without going into too much details, because people will understand that I can't, we're facing a difficult few days where our reputation is again going to be dragged through the mud. And we do have to bounce back from these things. Look, the report will come out, the Cala report. We will obviously comply with all the recommendations. When I say we, it's very much confined to Liverpool City Council, so it is not the combined authority. There's no contagion whatsoever with what we've done. It is very much a single council. There are 6 councils, so it's not the other councils neither. But we do need to do things after that, and one of those will be about looking towards building that fairer society, and that's why the Fair Employment Charter really will really start to come to the fore. And I genuinely do think, because I know that other people are looking at it, but I think there'll be a lot of other areas in the country, and Francis O'Grady wants this to be a platform and a plank of what the TUC will be promoting. But I think there'll be lots of other people who look at what we're doing here and they'll adopt something similar.
Brilliant. I agree. I think when you look at it, it's a great idea. You think, why has somebody not done it before? But when you look at it, it's really well thought through, like really clever things. It's quite simple and straightforward, but you can see that actually a lot of complexity and a lot of detail behind it. So with that said, Steve, let's now I've got first question in. So it doesn't. So it's anonymous attendee. If it's abusive, I'll still read it to you, Steve. I'll enjoy that. Right. So it says an interesting difference in the names being used between the Fair Employment Charter and the Good Business Charter. So this is the difference between us and the Manchester one. Putting to one side the great intentions of it for existing businesses, does that nuance present a danger of discouraging business from locating or investing here to the benefit of areas which frame this as a more pro-business charter?
Interesting question, in all honesty. We don't think so, but I like yourself and many of the people who will be scientists on this, I believe in evidence-based suppositions. So what we'll have to do is to look at whether there are any dangers in this. We haven't quite thought it through like that, in all honesty. But I have to say, it's probably a minor consideration with the other things that are going to have that reputational damage that will potentially put off investors coming to the city region. That's where we need to pitch our tent. We've got a lot to do on inward investment. FDI literally has fallen off a cliff. It's fallen off a cliff for a few years, and that's because of some of the things that were going on that we now know about. We need to do significantly more to give confidence to those people that their money won't end up in a stalled project in the city region, well, in Liverpool, in all honesty, because it doesn't happen anywhere else. But it won't be part of that. So that's why a Fair Employment Charter for me gives us the differential. But me and Burnham, and there's at least 2 others now, including what's going to happen in the West Yorkshire area, because they're getting their first ever election for a Metro Mayor, and it's likely to be a Labour Metro Mayor. So we're working between the 3 of us to see whether they can adopt what we've already done, and then it starts to make more sense to unify it under the same name. But as it spreads out, I think the question's really good, and we'll certainly be looking at the implications of that.
Okay, that's really helpful. Now, the second question is from Andrew Ruffler. Hello, Andrew. I know you've been on these events before. So he's asking a really straightforward, practical one. What steps can businesses start to take immediately to support this initiative?
Plenty of signing up, but I'm not naive enough to believe that everyone's going to go, do you know what, this is exactly what we were waiting for. Thank God that he's come up with something here and we can just adopt it. there'll be plenty of people who will be fearful of what this might mean to their businesses. So we're doing it in 3 stages, as you know. And an entry stage, if you like, and which is a statement of intent, a middle stage where people will move towards what we want. And what we want is the sort of gold standard. And we haven't yet brought in the gold standard because we think with the pandemic currently, that might be too big an ask straight away. And we're still developing ideas around some of that. So I'd say, go onto the website and have a little look at it first. But if you want any more information, just contact us either through yourselves, through Professional Liverpool, or through the combined authority and info at Liverpool City Region -ca.gov.uk. We can give you all the details at the end.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, the next question, we're back to a slightly longer one. Hi, just wondering how the Charter works with a recovering economic outlook and a region that will need to grow young and entrepreneurial business that won't have the money to support higher wages. Will the metro region look to support entrepreneurs across the spectrum to come to and grow the region?
Yes, as in we're doing that now. So we've already introduced a future innovation fund, again, the first in the country to do so, and that is to attract not just entrepreneurs who happen to live outside the city region to come in, but our Indigenous entrepreneurial spirit needs to have the platform to express itself. So we're doing things like creating a digital loop which goes through all 6 of our districts, and hopefully people have seen this announcement. But it links in with the Hartree supercomputer, which is in SciTech in Daresbury, which is, by the way, the most sophisticated computer in the country, and everybody will think it's Oxford or Cambridge or London. It's not. It's on our doorstep. And then it links through all 6 districts back to Southport, and the fibre optic cables that link the UK with North America come ashore in Southport. Again, I bet a lot of people won't understand that. So that gives us then, this loop gives us the ability for ultra fast speeds, which gives us that edge over super fast, and will attract some of those entrepreneurs to come in. It also gives us big data capacity, big data analytics capacity. So we can do stuff, and I want to do stuff on health. I really want to work with some of our institutions to look at how we can use this infrastructure, but also to provide the entrepreneurs the ability to bring their ideas forward, because it's going to be owned by, well, it's going to be partly owned by us, because we have to have a joint venture, because BT, Openreach and Virgin, etc., are very nervous in us entering the market. And there's a book by Mariana Mazzucato, who's an American economist, called The Entrepreneurial State. And that was my driver for this. Basically, what she did, she identified that actually it's state innovation and investment that quite often comes up with the raw ingredients, where then entrepreneurs apply that to something. So, for instance, she described the sort of smartphone and said, if you have a look at that, GPS is from the American military, the touchscreen is from NASA, etc., and goes through it. And actually, it was somebody then who got all of those bits and made something different. And that's what we want to become. We want to become the entrepreneurial state, if you like, and start to create the infrastructure, but also provide the investment support. And we're doing that more than anywhere else outside of London. So Shoreditch, eat your heart out.
So I think that's pretty clear on the innovation front, and clearly that's one of the consequences of COVID has almost been that, certainly in the first wave, where we lost our worldwide supply chains and had to look to local businesses. So hopefully that will be a legacy we take forward. And of course, the other thing that's happened in the workplace is that kind of relates to this charter is, of course, people have been working from home, and suddenly we're seeing a significant increase in the number of female staff at board level and things, because people have realized things like flexible working and job share isn't the end of the world. So I think maybe just to kind of reiterate, Steve, because this isn't just about pay, this is about creating those flexible conditions that allow people to work and be innovative and be creative.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and also it's about work-life balance, as always. You know, one of the things that will affect your performance the most in work are things that happen at home, and we need to understand that better. And that's why, you know, some of those things that we're trying to build into our thinking around this whole issue are how you can get more, but by treating people better and giving them those flexibilities. And look, I'm a bricklayer by trade, and I've never worked from home. Well, you can't really build brick walls in your living room because the wife really doesn't appreciate it. And I've really found it quite stretching, all of this, you know, working virtually. For instance, I thought the first sort of few months when there was the lockdown, this was novel. I mean, I'd literally never done it before, so it was quite novel. I found this very, very challenging this third time. The second lockdown, a bit challenging, but I found this third bit, you know, since January, this has been incredibly challenging for me. Now, there will be people who, you know, having to do this for all sorts of things and work stupid hours and sitting down, and you know what it's like when you're working from home. You probably the seat's not the right seat for you. So that's what happened with me, and I got a coccydynia, really, really painful. That was because I didn't consider it myself. So employers need to be thinking about that. There was all the stuff around regular breaks, and you don't do that. The fact that this thing is there all the time, people believe that they can contact you 24/7, and I'm genuine about that, because we get international calls and people are saying, well, I'll call you at 1 in the morning. You're like, well, that might be fine for you, but at some stage I'd quite like some sleep. So there's all of these considerations that we've never had before. Plus, IT has become so important in all of our lives. It always has been, you know, since it was sort of invented, if you like, but it really is now, isn't it? Because it's not just about this sort of stuff. It's about all of the other stuff that we're starting to learn, and you know, education will be through this, and there'll always now, I think, be a type of blended learning in schools and in universities. If you are unfortunate enough to become unemployed and you have to claim universal credit, I guess how you do it now, it's online. I've just been through recruiting a new chief executive. A lot of it was through this. So the world has changed, and we need to change with it. And that's why I think the flexibilities around working ways are really, really important.
Okay, thank you. Now, so from lofty visions, and clearly it's voluntary, Steve, one of the questions is, thanks for the great answers, is there a link to LEP funds available? So, you know, I assume there isn't now, but maybe there might be something.
No, we've got something on that, because the fund, the Future Innovation Fund, that was the stuff that we put out, which is tried to attract some of the entrepreneurs of tomorrow for today. I genuinely think that there's no end of talent in the Liverpool City region. And look, this is between us, but some of that hasn't necessarily always been formalised. So I'd quite like to bring that inside the tent and give those people the opportunity to legitimise a lot of the stuff that they'll have been doing, you know, as a sole trader or as an entrepreneur. So bring that in and start to create that ecosystem around which everybody feels comfortable to do that. That means, of course, then we need a business support mechanism that underpins that. That's why we've got the growth platform. When I walked into the office and started to look around the sort of business support landscape, there were hundreds of organisations who said that they provided business support. We've now channeled that to a single point of contact. I was calling it one front door because that's what I wanted for everything that goes on. It's called the growth platform. So there are things that we're doing that are there in regards to the LEP funds, and there are LEP funds. They'll be also on the growth platform site, but ours, which is the combined authority, our funding is all on our site, and we've brought it all together so you can have a look at what happens in each other's organisations as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So I think we're kind of getting to the point where we're clear about the charter. We're clear about where it is now, and the commitment to it. You can see how the future aspirations are shaping. So as you say, Steve, it's something that we'd want to be evangelical and champion across the country and associate with the area. I suppose that's kind of an incredibly important thing. And I suppose longer term, certainly one of the things post-COVID for us is most of the trusts in the area have become anchor institutions. I've thought more about what do we what services and what do we employ and what products do we get locally. And clearly, without kind of going off on one, but clearly if an organisation's committed to the Fair Employment Charter, that has to be of value and of merit and of something that we in the Liverpool City Region would want to encourage and hopefully at some point acknowledge, I suppose I'd want to say. And then given that, so I'm just going to check there's another question there. Yeah, no, just they're liking your answers actually. You might get re-elected if this carries on. Right, so I think really, so given it a real good feel for it, I think maybe if we just kind of conclude this bit then really, Steve, with perhaps you just kind of sum up why particularly the private sector might wish to commit to it, and just perhaps share the email address again, really. That'd be a really helpful way to kind of conclude it, because I think we've covered all bases.
Thanks, Mike. Look, the way we treat our people and our workforces is really important, of course, to them individually and to the business, but also by doing the right thing, it affects people's bottom line. And I'm not bothered really about people making profit, but I think profit has to be for purpose. And the more in which that happens, the more employment opportunity we can provide for the people in our city region. So this is not a race to the bottom. It's quite the opposite. You know, Freeport has been bandied around recently and mentioned in all sorts of dispatches. What I've said with the development of a Freeport is we'll go through the stages. As you know, we were identified in the budget as passing muster on a couple of stages that we've gone through, but I haven't yet fully accepted it because we don't know about what the influence is of what we can do, because it will be almost, behind, I'm going to say barbed wire, but that gives the wrong impression, but it'll be fenced off, so it's a geographically fenced area. And we don't want that to be in competition with the people who are doing the right thing. So this then starts to drive economic thinking and good business practice. And what we want to do in our city region is become an exemplar. We actually want people to say, have a look at what's happening there. And we want our businesses to do better by being part of this. This is not meant to be detrimental to anybody. The whole ethos of this is a win-win situation. If we can get to that stage and people are starting to identify us as a place to do business in, but also to do good business in, then that's where we should be. And later this year, we've got another iteration of the Good Business Festival. And that, again, when you start to hear about some of that corporate social responsibility from ethical businesses around the world and how they've been then able to win contracts and to increase turnover and to employ more people, all of those good business practices all start to make sense. And the poorer you treat your workforce, the poorer your outlook will be as a business. The Fair Employment Charter gives you a step-by-step guide in how you can become a good business, a good employer, and a good workforce. And that, I think, will only stand it in good stead as we start to see the vicissitudes of the economic after winds that are going to come from post-Brexit, but also post-pandemic.
Thank you, Steve. That was really clear, really helpful, and evangelical. So Ed has helpfully put the website link in the chat. So just to kind of end. So thank you for that, Steve. We just thought we'd end by just handing back to Dr. Edward Lynch, just to say a few things, just to maybe sum up, and just to say a few things about the vaccine as well, just because it's something that Professional Liverpool are keen to champion and keen to dispel any myths. And thanks again, Steve, and hope to see you soon. All right, thank you. Over to you, Dr. Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Steve. Really, really interesting discussion there, and I hope everyone's questions were answered. So we're going to actually talk a little bit about COVID presentations, the vaccines themselves, and also I run a business on the side of this, so it might be interesting for people to hear that, Steve was talking a lot about the Future Innovation Fund, and we put a bid in back in August, September time, and thankfully we were one of the businesses that got it. We've had massive amounts of support from the City Region through the growth platform, through the combined authority. The whole City Region's been fantastic. So I think for anybody on the call who would like to engage with that support, it's just about networking and reaching out to them. So a lot of that I did through Professional Liverpool. That's kind of how my relationship with them has grown. So the City Region does have a lot of fantastic resource, but it's about being proactive to reach that support. So let me share with you my screen. Hang on a second, I always forget how to do this. Okay, I hope you can see this. So we're going to do a little bit about COVID and a little bit around the vaccines and the companies. The company I set up is called Life, and like I said, this is the company that got the first round of funding through the Future Innovation Fund. So the help is out there. We got it through Liverpool City Region. Growth platform helped a lot, and we initially had our help from the European Union. And it's great to say that we're on the LCR Tech Climbers list of this year as well. So that's fantastic. I know I've done this talk in the past, and people don't believe that I'm a doctor. So, I'm not paid by Boris to say these things. I am genuinely working in hospitals. So I've done, when you're a junior doctor, they like you to do various kind of, they call them placements. So I've worked on ITU, in A&E, cardiology, CCU, which is an acute unit. We work across the board, but pretty much by and large over the past year I have been on COVID. This is the platform that was funded by the Future Innovation Fund. It ties in really nicely with what we were talking. Actually, it's a platform that we've created, which is all around optimizing employee welfare and their well-being. It's all based on medical research that we've done ourselves. So I actually spoke to a member of the CA the other week about how we can potentially integrate this into the Liverpool City Region. So you can see there actually Rise Fitness Studios at the bottom. It's all about connecting you to the healthy things that you can do around you in Liverpool, and it is just in Liverpool for now. You see there that you've got White Wolf Yoga. We've got tons of retail partners across the City Region that all help you engage with this healthy lifestyle. It's basically a one access port for everything healthy. And then also you can track your well-being in there as well. We spelled scoring correctly, marvelously. So you can track your well-being within the app there. and get a good idea. So that's based on medical research as well. So it's all highly validated tools. So we get a really good understanding of how people's mental health and how their well-being is. Okay, let's move on to COVID. So this is a normal chest X-ray. This is what we like to see. This is, so anything black on this picture is air. Anything white is a bit denser. So it's, you know, it's harder material. If you look at the bones here, there's your clavicle, or rather your collarbone there. You can see the sternum coming down. This white blob here is your heart, and these big black things are, I don't know if it's obvious, but they are your lungs. So nice, big, black, filled bits of air within the chest cavity. This little bubble here is actually the air bubble, which sits at the top of your stomach. So this is what we like to see, these sharp angles at the base of the lung. That's a lovely chest X-ray, and that's what we like to see. Okay, this is a pneumonia. So what we see with a pneumonia is typically it's one-sided. So you can see this patchy area here. This is called unilateral consolidation. So it's right-sided on the right-hand lung. That's, you're looking at the patient here. So that is their right lung, and it's the middle lobe. It's sitting in the middle, and just consolidation means there's like fluffy, phlegmy rubbish in there as your body's fighting that immune response. So this is how we typically see in pneumonia. It's what we call unilateral, one-sided, patchy consolidation. Now this is COVID. You can see that the changes to the lungs are vast, both sides. The black space that we originally had has pretty much all vanished. We might have some air diffusion going on up here, but you know, if you imagine how much oxygen a person requires to actually do functions, this is very, very little amounts of oxygen getting into the blood. And this is, if we imagine that the patient's got a few comorbidities, let's throw in some diabetes, some heart disease, let's say that they're overweight, you know, the outlook for the patient is very, very, very poor. So people who say that COVID doesn't exist, here is just one example of a classical COVID presentation. And we aren't just using swabs to diagnose this. The swab helps in the diagnosis, of course, but it isn't the only thing that we look at. So when people get really pent up about swabs and the efficacy of the swabs, you know, the false positive rate, the false negative rate, with all due respect, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that, you know, you don't necessarily need to understand as a layperson, but trust us that we are not just using a swab result. The swabs are good. We understand the efficacy of the swabs. We know how to stack swabs together. We know how to correlate that with clinical pictures, patient presentations, X-rays, blood results. You know, it's a multifactorial diagnosis that we take into account. It's not just swabs. So I hope you can see there that, you know, rest assured that we aren't cowboys, and the NHS is a great thing. Okay, so what do we actually do for these patients? Well, unfortunately, there's not too much that we can do. The mainstay treatment is around oxygen therapy. So this is called nasal cannula, or NC for short. This is where you'd start. So if your oxygen saturations, the amount of oxygen within the blood is dropping below around 92%, unless you're a smoker. We have different guidelines for smokers. If you're smoking, please stop. It's obviously terrible, but coupled with a respiratory disease makes it even worse. And we would start here at nasal cannula. So they go into your nose, and we give you around 2 to 4 liters of oxygen. We then move up this sliding scale as you require more oxygen. These Venturi masks are fantastic. So this is a breakdown on the bottom right of a Venturi mask, and we can titrate people up and down these little Venturis really, really nicely. So you see 24% oxygen up to 35. They're not quite in the right order, but you can titrate up and down this pathway as you like, all the way up to around 60%. If we're needing more than that, then we have to go to a non-rebreather mask. And then you keep going up until you're eventually at CPAP, which is what this gentleman is on here. As you can see, it's very, very invasive. It's not nice. You've got seat belts on your head and on the back of your neck. It feels as though you've put your face out of the car window on the motorway. That's the kind of pressures we're talking about there. And that's to force oxygen down into the lung, into the little air sacs that sit within the lung, to try and force them open. Because as you saw on the previous x-ray, all the fluffy stuff, that fills the air sacs. There's nowhere for the oxygen to actually diffuse across into the blood. So these masks are to force that air down. Beyond that, we've got intubation. That is not where we want to be. 50% of people who are tubed do unfortunately die. So I'm really quite aggressive with my oxygen therapy. If somebody's on a Venturi, I will always be weaning them down, taking them off it as soon as possible, and constantly checking their sats. If we can get them down, great. If they're moving up, that's when we get worried. But again, you see in the news about DNAR decisions, do not attempt resuscitation for CPR. Those decisions are made by individual doctors. There's no broad kind of guidelines that we follow for this. It's not a one size fits all. It's a multifactorial picture that we look at. And if the patient is not appropriate to have CPR, then we put this with this form in, and it's not a nice discussion to have with the family, because especially with what we see in the news, it's seen as this terrible thing. But actually, I make sure that my vulnerable family members have colloquially they're called a purple form. I really push to make sure that my family have a purple form, because CPR is a terrible, terrible thing to have done to you, especially if it's unsuccessful. Let's say we take a really healthy young gentleman, no health comorbidities at all. Your chances of survival from CPR, if we catch it immediately, which is rare because you have to be on a heart monitor. So let's say we catch it immediately within the second, your chances of survival in that young gentleman are only 12%. Okay, let's add in that you're now 92. You're a frail old lady, you've got COVID, you've got 10 comorbidities. We catch it 10 minutes late because not everybody's on a heart monitor. We've only got about 10 beds in the average hospital that are monitored. Your chances of survival are so small. And then you've got to take into account brain injuries, and you can see quickly how with this is the reason why we put in these DNAR forms, because even if we do bring them back in that 0.1% chance, what would their quality of life be like afterwards? So yeah, it's a medical decision. It's a hard discussion to have with families, but it's not what you see in the news. I as an individual will try and create a plan for the patients and sit down with my consultant and be like, what do we think about this? It's not a blanket thing that we apply across, let's say, the disabled population like it's made out in the news. Okay, so pharmacological therapy. Like I said before, there's not too much we can do, to be honest. We give dexamethasone, which is a steroid, which is what you see here. The steroids are good. We give everyone the steroids that come in into A&E. We give them IV, so through the vein, and then as they get better, hopefully we drop them down to oral tablets. The other thing that we've seen with COVID, now let me make this absolutely clear, a COVID infection. An actual COVID infection, not the vaccine. So an actual COVID infection, we give them something called enoxaparin, which is a blood thinner. So with an actual COVID infection, we do see an increase in blood clots. With the vaccine, we have not seen that at all, as you've probably seen from the USA trial that came out today. What you've got to remember is, if you do get the vaccine, it's just purely on a numbers game. If you vaccinated 17 million people, the chances are that one of those people are probably going to die after getting the vaccine. Does that mean that the vaccine has caused them to die? Absolutely not. If I got the vaccine and was hit by a bus, I wouldn't blame the vaccine on that. These are some trial drugs. This is part of the recovery trial that is being ran across the country. Aspirin sits within this as well, but to be honest, I wouldn't worry about that. Your mainstay treatment is oxygen therapy, dexamethasone, which is a steroid, and enoxaparin, which is your blood thinner. So yeah, onto the vaccines. There's going to be I know we did this talk through the week, and there was so many questions around the vaccine. Should I get it? And people were asking very, very nuanced and specific questions, which obviously apply to their personal lives. But you have to remember, this is the most highly regulated industry in the world. And I was actually one of the first 500 people in the UK to have the Oxford vaccine. So we had a lovely video from Boris saying thank you so much. It was like something off a film. But yeah, you know, they are very, very highly regulated, and they are safe. They are far better than getting COVID. Of course, the research is ongoing, so we won't know absolutely everything about them, but we know that it is safe to go out to the public. Another myth is that these vaccines have been whipped up in the past year. It's not true. The Oxford vaccine, the research was started around 6 years ago. If you imagine that we started building the building blocks of this vaccine back about 5-6 years ago, and basically what we've done is, in fact, I can stop sharing my screen now so I can talk to you guys. 1 second. So with the vaccines, what we've done is we've actually taken an adenovirus from a chimpanzee, which is, it causes the common cold, essentially. There's lots of different types of viruses. You've got rhinoviruses, coronaviruses, adenoviruses, lots of different kinds. We've taken an adenovirus from a chimpanzee, completely stripped of it, all of the DNA inside, or RNA, stripped all of that out of there. And COVID-19, it's a coronavirus. The reason why it's called coronavirus is because it looks like a crown. So the crown that, you know, corona in Latin is crown. And you see the spike proteins being talked about all the time. The spike protein looks like a crown, and that's how it's getting access into cells. So essentially what the Oxford vaccine has done, it's taken the adenovirus, which is the building blocks. If you imagine that's the foundation of your house, it's built the foundations, built the walls, and it's built the roof. And then we've taken that spike protein and put it inside of the house. And you imagine that like decorating the house on the inside. The beauty of this vaccine is, well, one, the research started years ago. And two, even if that spike protein does mutate, all we have to do is redecorate the inside of the house. We have the foundations, we have the walls, we have the roof. The Oxford vaccine it's called a viral vector. So I'm not saying any particular vaccine is better, but theoretically, the Oxford vaccine is better at adapting to mutations because, as I said, we have the foundations. If that spike protein changes, we redecorate the inside of the house. That's why the Oxford vaccine is genuinely fascinating, and it's breaking all rules of science so far. In terms of efficacy, whether you're getting Pfizer, Moderna, whether you're getting the Oxford one, they're all effective vaccines. And trust me when I say this, I've spoken to enough 45-year-old women who have lost their husbands to COVID with no comorbidities at all. It is killing people, so please get your vaccines. You know, after the last time we spoke, quite a few guys and ladies called me. You know, they went through Professional Liverpool and just said, you know, do you mind if I ask a couple of questions? And that's fine. You know, if you've got any questions, throw them in the chat down below, or let me know. I'm happy to ameliorate any issues that you have. But yeah, vaccines are a great thing, and you know, we've had a great rollout across the UK. We're doing really, really well. I know there's some issues with the EU bloc, and you know, the supply issues are kind of it's in the news today, isn't it, about whether the exports are fair. But you know, the UK have done really, really well. So we would like to think that things are back to normal here within the next 2-3 months. But then, of course, we don't know what's going to happen with mutations, and there are a lot of unknowns. It's great to see that the way we've actually built the vaccine is this kind of like foundational block approach, where if it mutates, we hopefully can whip another vaccine up and get it out to the population. But you know, we just don't know how the disease is going to develop. It could be like the flu, where we get yearly vaccines. Who knows at this stage? But I hope that answers a couple of questions around the vaccine and settles a few of the fears. So yeah, again, thank you to Mike and Steve for the great chat today. Really appreciate you all attending, and big thanks to Professional Liverpool again for putting on such a fantastic event. So if there aren't any questions, thank you all, and we'll see you soon.